Please turn your hymnals to Nothing But Peace Is Enough, 167. Stand as you're willing and able, and we'll sing together.
We'll sing this through once, and then we'll go through it another couple times, and feel free to then come in at the number 1, or at number 2 you can come in.
Come, come, whoever you are welcome here. No matter your age, your size, the color of your eyes, your hair, your skin, you are welcome here. No matter your gender, whom you love, how you speak, or whatever your abilities, you are welcome here. You're welcome here whether you come with laughter in your heart or tears in your eyes. You are welcome here. No matter what you've experienced in the past, no matter what awaits in the future, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God all of the time, some of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. This is a community of open minds, loving hearts, and willing hands, and you are welcome here. And as we gather this morning, let us pause and acknowledge the ground upon which we gather is the ancestral and current home of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. With humility for the ways in which we have unwittingly participated in the harms perpetuated, past and present, we seek now to learn a new way forward. We begin to partner, to ally, to witness with our Indigenous siblings and friends, the bringing forth of a sacred dream of a community restored to fullness and a world healed to greater wholeness. And good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm Brenda, and I've been here a long time. I'm a member here. Pronouns are she and her. Welcome to everybody here and to those in the virtual audience. We're glad you're with us. We have an annual meeting coming up toward the end of May, May 21st, and that's also Youth Bridging Service. They literally walk over a bridge. You got to come. It's really cool. And there will be a potluck lunch, and then we'll have our meeting. It's election of officers, it's budget, it's activities with the Anti-Racism Task Force. And so in happenings will be the full agenda for that and the budget proposal. And everyone is welcome, and then members can vote. And we're having a membership ceremony in case you want to become one of those members who can vote. There's a membership ceremony Sunday, May 7th during worship. And so if you've been thinking about it and are ready to join or have a talk about it, you can talk to Reverend Lora and you can talk to Laura Renshaw. And so let's take a moment to share the warmth of community and say good morning and hello, stand up, greet each other.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Lora Young, and it is so good to be with you this morning. I'm going to stand over here because that light is brighter than God on the pulpit right now, and I can't see anything. So it is good to be here this morning on this celebratory Sunday when we recognize that the Christians celebrate Easter, the Jewish people are celebrating Passover, and our Islamic brothers and sisters are in the midst of their Ramadan. This beautiful spring time is also the time when the earth is coming back to life, and we are noticing finally in Salt Lake City that spring is arriving. Though it's going to snow later this week, I'm told. And we will just ignore that snow as much as we can. Each of these religious observances in the springtime often come together around feasts and around the sharing and breaking of bread and the creating of community. So however it is that you mark this time of year, let it be one of joyful celebration and feasting with those that are closest to you. As we light our chalice, the symbol of our faith, in the light of our commitments to love and justice, receive these words of invocation by Alberto Rios. One river gives its journey to the next, he writes. And you can light it as I'm reading it because it's a very long poem, so that would make it hard. We give because someone gave to us. We give because nobody gave to us. We give because giving has changed us. We give because giving could have changed us. We have been better for it. We have been wounded by it. Giving has so many faces. It is loud and quiet, big though small, diamond and wood nails. It is a story old, the plot worn, and the pages too. But we read the book anyway, over and over again. Giving is first and every time, hand to hand, mine to yours, and yours to mine. You gave me blue and I gave you yellow. Together we are simply green. You gave me what you did not have, and I gave you what I had to give. And together we made something greater in that difference. So let us light our chalice. And as we've lit this chalice, let us now say our words that remember this community into wholeness. They're printed in your order of service, if you have that pulled up on your phone or in the paper, or maybe you have them memorized if you've been here for 30 years, like Brenda. We light this chalice for the warmth of love, for the light of truth, and the energy of action, and the flames of resistance. So I'm going to turn it over to Robb for his announcements and his story for all ages this morning.
All right, I'd like to invite all of our young people and the young at heart to join me up front for our time together this morning. And today we'll just kind of gather the best we can over in this area. I think there's going to be a lot of us. So come on up and find a spot. So wonderful to see some Easter bunny ears paired with some unicorn horns. Very Eastery. Good morning, good morning. Come on up, good to see all of you. All right, well, welcome. This morning, Reverend Lora is going to be visiting with our friends upstairs here a little bit about miracles. And this Sunday, for many of our Christian neighbors, we are celebrating Easter, and we remember that someone who was really, really good at bringing people together and teaching his followers about, oh, I thought I heard my name. Oh. Did you? He was really good about teaching his followers about ways that we can live that are good and ways that we can share with others, and ways that we could treat our neighbors. And that person was Jesus. And a lot of people during Jesus' time remember him performing miracles that maybe seemed a little bit like magic. And other people who study the Bible and others who maybe see these stories of Jesus a little bit differently, notice that another way we can think about Jesus' miracles is that wherever Jesus was and wherever Jesus could be, that he was able to bring people around him and build community, just like we do in this church. We come together, we build community, we do important things together. And Jesus wanted to encourage his followers to do the same thing. So whenever Jesus gathered with his followers, he would teach them things. And suddenly Jesus' followers knew better how to share with others, and they knew better how to treat other people. And so sometimes really the miracle in Jesus's experiences with his friends is that he was able to help other people show others how to do these good things and how to share. And it is really a miracle when we can all gather like this in one place toward a common goal. That is pretty amazing. The other thing that we know about the kind of person that Jesus was is that Jesus loved children. And Jesus listened to the things that children had to say, because Jesus realized that some of the things that the children had to say were the things that the grown-ups really needed to hear and really needed to be reminded of. And we have another miracle this morning that some of you helped create, and that is the miracle of this beautiful sun up above our chancel. You all helped create the center of our sun, and we had some other friends who have filled out our sun with some of the things that we think are important in our faith, in Unitarian Universalism. And it is a miracle that this group of people, even though sometimes we might disagree on things, we all agree that there are certain things that are really, really important. So up here we see equity, making sure that each person has what they need to be successful. And we have interdependence, and interdependence is a word that reminds us that we need one another. We rely on one another. And then we have pluralism, and pluralism reminds us that here at this church, we all come from very different religious and non-religious backgrounds, and we believe different things. And it is those different beliefs that really makes for a wonderful community here. We realize that it's those things that make us different that bring us together here. Justice, it's important to us that everyone is treated fairly, everyone has the same opportunities, and a lot of times we have people in our community who get ignored, people who are not listened to. And this has been happening for all of history. And so we need to speak up, and we need to advocate for that justice. Transformation. Oh my goodness, there are so many ways in our lives that we are transformed as we get older and we understand more things and our hearts grow to love more and more. We are transformed. And when we come here and we listen to these stories of our faith, these stories of our ancestors, and we realize the connections that these stories have to us today, these stories can transform us and connect us to our ancestors. Generosity, that's a big one too. Here in this community, we share not only our money here in this church and outside of these walls, but we also share our time. Your RE teachers share their time teaching you on a couple of Sundays during the month. We also share our talents. Say, hey, I'm really good at something. I'm really good at cooking. I really enjoy preparing food. I wonder if there's a way that I can help the church with the things that I love. And maybe I am really good at playing piano. Well, not me specifically, but people like Rick are really good at playing piano. And so Rick uses his talents here in our church to, he and John help present and help us join in this beautiful music. So all of these important things that we believe as Unitarian Universalists. And it is, as I said, really a miracle when all of these things come together and we can all be in one place and enjoy each other's company and enjoy this community. And so I am so glad that you all are here this morning. And if you would like, we do have childcare available downstairs in the religious education hallway for our little ones, ages 3 and younger. The rest of you are welcome to come down. We are going to go down these stairs, and then when we get to the very bottom of both sets of stairs, we're going to go around the corner into the social hall. We're going to hear a little bit more about the story of Easter, and then a little bit later, we're going to come back up and enjoy the messages and the music today. And then, after worship, we will all convene out in the backyard for our hunt for justice. All right? Okay, so I will see you downstairs.
Just need a hat. You just wear a hat up here, you're good. How long can we keep that going? Okay. Oh, it's time for our offertory. This church is the community of ourselves. And our many ministries are only made possible by what we give of our time and our talent and our treasure. And many of us pledge monthly, that was a great scream, to make sure that we can continue. We're in the midst of a pledge drive as well, so if anyone is still to turn in your pledge information, we'd love to have you do that as we prepare for next year. We also share our worship offerings that we take on a Sunday with an organization that shares our values in the community and we can support. And this month is White Helmets, a humanitarian group that provides emergency services across the world in war zones and during environmental disasters. And so let us say our offering words together. We are this church. We are its hands, its heart, its voice. Together we share the wealth of this community and sustain it with our gifts. And now we get the gift of music.
This melody is from the opera about Orpheus and Eurydice. So for those who are just familiar with that story, it's a little bit of a theme of like underworld and returning and stuff like that. So I thought it was fitting.
For all that we have found the courage to give, may we be truly grateful. May these gifts be a blessing on the White Helmet and on South Valley. Luckily, I don't have to get my plunger hat out. Please join me in a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer. These words were written by my colleague, the Reverend Sarah Lawal. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and no names, force of love, hear our prayer on this morning, this Easter morning, as we roll back the stone covering the most tender places of our hearts, holding the pain of the world, of our own lives, the disappointment pushing down upon us with trembling hands and weary spirits. May we feel the light of love pour forth and know we are not alone. May we feel the call to reach in and bring that love out into the world in full force, even if we are not sure what it looks like, even if we are afraid, even if the world feels like it is breaking and the chasm is widening, even if, especially if. May we feel the hope and possibility of new life, creation remade and remade again and again and again with our help, with our hands and our feet and our eyes and our ears, with our prayers and our fellowship and our justice making, with tears and laughter, beauty and joy, all of it tangled up together. May we be the light of the world. May love prevail. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen. Let us continue this time of meditation and reflection by engaging in our ritual of joys and sorrows. To the left side this morning, not the right, we have our bowl of stones and water, and it is apt, as the Christian tradition rolls away the stone of the tomb, that we too pick up a stone and share it in community, knowing that our sorrows and our joys are held in this space together. I invite you, as the music plays, to come forward as you wish, to take a stone and place it in the water to represent that which is on your heart this morning. Let us be in community with one another. For those in our online community, we see you and join your sorrows and joys to ours. And for that which remains unspoken, but still held in community.
From the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 6, verse 30. Jesus feeds the 5,000, or on feeding the 5,000. And if you count women and children, it was more than 5,000, which we do. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. So as he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." But he answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they had found out, they said, 5, and 2 fish. Then he ordered them to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and of 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. And thus ends our reading.
So it's often customary on Easter morning to preach about the death and resurrection of Jesus. But this being a Unitarian church, I thought we'd start earlier in the story. I'll start with the feeding of the 5 or 15,000, because I very much count the women and children who were part of those family groups that were gathered to hear this radical Jewish rabbi preach this message of love and justice and beloved community. But it's hard to escape that this particular story includes a miracle. And it's hard to escape on Easter morning that miracle is at the heart of the Christian story. So this morning of all mornings, we're going to dive right in and talk about miracles. And acknowledge that it seems that sometimes, perhaps, miracles might occur. For example, the Great Salt Lake is up 3 feet, despite the continued quarreling of state leaders about how to balance the expectations of corporations accustomed to freely taking what they want and to balance those with the actual needs of the people and the animals and the plants and the fish that call this valley home. Some may claim that this 3-foot rise is just a natural occurrence or the result of climate change. Others may point to Governor Cox's plea a 1.5 years ago that we pray for rain. My favorite so far, though,
is the ode to the rainbow whale at 9th and 9th. The story is right now that the rainbow whale is pleasing to the deity of the long gone Lake Bonneville, and she has had mercy upon us. What I notice and lift up for you here in this community, see, I had to make you laugh before I hit you with the miracle stories. What I notice and lift up here is that we are all seeking an explanation for how to navigate the storm that we are in. We're seeking an explanation for how to navigate the storm that we all know that we are in. And where we locate and how we locate the answer will guide our future responses and actions. It would be, of course, a mistake to imagine that the destitution and the dying off of the Great Salt Lake is somehow solved by a 3-foot rise of this early part of the spring runoff. However, let us just take a moment and appreciate that nevertheless, the reprieve for the birds and the brine shrimp is heartily welcome. Miracles are often a very confounding issue for modern folks like us, steeped as we are in the scientific methodology of critical analysis and proof and verifying of claims, and grounded in the awareness of the physical laws that govern our world. Miracles and belief in their occurrence can be difficult to maintain without some sort of mental gymnastics or moral ambivalence. I'd like to just set that part aside. The morality of miracles is not our concern this morning. Our concern this morning is, how do miracles help us navigate the storm that we are currently in? Help us root ourselves and ground ourselves in a necessary reality such that we have hope and resilience in the face of the challenges that are surrounding us. Our current context right now is indeed a storm. We're in the midst of deep polarization, and the news cycle, which has always been one prone to stir us up, to stir up and to trouble those waters, is now been infiltrated with deep fakes and fake news and disillusionment campaigns. And so finding our way through that and knowing where to ground ourselves is critical. So dismissing miracles out of hand is not an option for this next 20 minutes. And here's why. Because, some other reasons why. So because engaging with miracle stories, those stories that don't fit the rational narrative, those are some of our most precious stories in this culture. So relegating those stories that don't fit to the shadows of our lives is to kind of miss the point. I can recall when I worked as a chaplain in the hospital that many times patients would come to me and they would reveal those sacred, precious, mystical experiences of their lives to me because they trusted that I would believe them. And some of these people had never told that story yet, and they were of advanced age. To witness that type of story is truly its own kind of miracle. I also, in my time as a chaplain, observed the deep harm done by poor theologies of miracles that cause suffering to be sustained within a family system or visited upon the bodies and spirits of patients that were in terrible suffering because they expected a miracle and one did not arrive. But I'll also say that the most frequent miracle I observed in the hospital was out of the gift of time, the opportunity to say goodbye due to advanced medical care that sustained a life until family could arrive at bedside. That and advanced pain management that alleviated suffering at the end of life for those that needed it.
But of course, those miracles don't get the credit they deserve, because those seem like maybe they're just the result of science, but is not science its own form of miracle, the dedication of a group of people over time and time and time and decades of discovery until we finally have a solution that in previous generations was relegated just to God's will? That's a miracle right there. So, from that secular context, I'm going to zoom us in real close to the Gospel of Mark, from which our reading came this morning. The Gospel of Mark, the author of the Gospel of Mark, whoever they might have been, was just as skeptical as you are of miracles. Was just as skeptical of miracles as you are. And perhaps even more so, because in that era, miracle workers were a dime a dozen. And the arrival of another one on the Sea of Galilee would have been no big deal. And yet, the gospel writer includes miracles in his gospel. But not for the reason that maybe you think he did, or they did, or she did, whoever they were. They included those miracle stories because they understood that stories have a power to unleash something different in our heart. Many people who read the Gospel of Mark are accustomed to seeing miracles as proof of the divinity of Jesus and the ability of God to supersede natural laws, but a closer reading reveals that Mark was up to something much more complex and nuanced. He wanted his readers to understand that community is where miracles happen. That community is where miracles happen. And that you do not need the superseding of an intervening God to create a human miracle. You just need the courage and the conviction and the willingness to show up for one another. Mark knew for his audience reading those early Gospels that they needed hope and resilience in a time where the Roman Empire was likely to crush all resistance. Perhaps we are in need of a similar kind of encouragement. And I would suspect that Mark would be a little alarmed at how his gospel is being used by some to insist on the divinity of the Jesus and on the insistence on the efficacy of praying for miracles. I think he would be upset. I think he would say that you missed the point, that you missed the mark. Nice. Sorry. I've been waiting all week for that one. So, okay, I'm going to take you into a close reading. So if you want to pull out your phone and pull up the New Revised Standard Version and follow along, you can totally geek out, Palmer. I know you're doing that right now. So the feeding of the 5,000, so just bear with me. I'm going to do this like exegetical part here. So the feeding of the 5,000 is what's called a nature miracle, a superseding of natural laws. And it's one of two nature miracles in the Gospel of Mark, both of which are about a miraculous feeding. So the story opens with the return of the disciples from their teaching and healing tours to the house where Jesus is staying. And Jesus observes that they are exhausted. And he says, you need to rest, so come with me to a desolate place away from the crowds that are consistently flocking around me. A desolate place or a deserted place or wilderness is a common theme in the Exodus story of the Hebrew Bible. And it is the site where God's provision and care for his chosen people frequently occurs. So from the very beginning, Mark is setting you up to let you know something is going to happen. God is going to show up. Other references to the Hebrew Bible that are used to set up the story include mountains, which is the location of God, sea crossings as transformative, Book of Jonah, the Exodus story, the remainder of the 12 baskets of bread for the 12 tribes of Israel, and the metaphorical use of eating bread for the learning of wisdom. By this imagery, the author signals to his Jewish audience that Jesus is the one who has been anointed by God. So then Jesus and his disciples arrive by boat to the desolate place where they see the crowds have followed them. Super annoying, I'm sure. Especially there's like 15,000 of them. That's a lot of people. Jesus, though, feels compassion and begins to teach them. And in this way, Jesus is modeling his understanding of the compassion God has for the people. Yahweh is a compassionate God, a God that is responsive to human suffering. And Jesus models a similar compassion for the crowds that follow him and are hungry for his teaching, as well as for physical sustenance. Second, Jesus understood the coming of God's kingdom as a fulfillment of the Jewish scriptures, a scriptural tradition with the foundation of loving one's neighbor as yourself. To feel with, to suffer with, and to respond to suffering were all well-established qualities within Jesus' Jewish context, and a major theme of the kingdom of God as he proclaimed it in the Gospel of Mark. Third, and Mark wants you to get this part too, the arising of compassion frequently precedes a miraculous act on Jesus' part. The rising of compassion precedes a miracle. Compassion is a swelling of the heart to the suffering of another in the moment in which God begins to show up and respond. We know that a miracle story of some sort is likely to happen based on this context, and that the miracle occurs in order to demonstrate the compassionate character of God that Jesus was proclaiming. Thus, we arrive at the magic moment when Jesus blesses the loaves and the fishes, and all that gathered are satisfied. But before we skip to the suspension of natural law, there is a moment, and this is a critical moment in the story, where Jesus pushes the disciples to act in a compassionate way toward the crowds. The disciples suggest to Jesus that they dismiss the people to leave food and find shelter. And Jesus replies, "Give them something to eat you yourselves. You do it," he says. You do it. You feed these people. The direction of the original Greek is a little bit lost in the phrasing for English, but the intention is clear. The disciples are to feed the people rather than to wait for God to do it. But of course, the disciples don't get it. They don't know how. They complain they don't have enough money. And so I guess Jesus just goes, okay, fine. And yet, here's the even more miraculous part. So Jesus snaps his finger or does whatever he does to supersede the natural law, and then everyone gets fed. And the disciples, they say nothing. They say nothing about it. They just collect the baskets, collect them up, bring them back to Jesus as if nothing happened. No big deal that Jesus just fed 15,000 people from 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And that is kind of the point of the entire Gospel of Mark. For the entire Gospel of Mark rests on the idea that the disciples don't get it. As you read further along, and I hope that you will maybe perhaps read Mark this week, or maybe even this afternoon as you go home from church, you'll realize that actually it's a comedy in which the disciples don't get it. They don't get it. No matter what Jesus does, they don't get it. No matter what parable story Jesus says to the disciples, they don't get it. They are like the fools in the story. And the point is that Mark knows that the audience that is receiving this story gets it. That the audience knows that these miracles and these parables are meant to enliven and bring open their heart and get them to feed one another in beloved community. So he uses the disciples as the foil for that. The inbreaking of God's kingdom and the reconciliation of humanity with God and how to live as such a way to make things pass is the point of Mark's gospel. Now, I know as a UU congregation, you're like, why are you saying kingdom of God? That is so weird, Reverend Lora. And I just want to say, let's translate that really quick for you and say radically compassionate community. Radically compassionate community, inclusive community, one that includes everybody. And even discipleship might be a little unfamiliar. Think of that as being the things that we would say spiritual practices that support ethical and compassionate living. Practices that support ethical and compassionate living and radically inclusive and compassionate community. That's what Jesus was talking about. He just used the language of his day. We use our own language of this day because that's what helps our hearts to open. So Mark is this masterful writer that creates this story in which the disciples don't get it. And even to the point when, spoiler alert, Jesus dies at the end of the story and is resurrected. I think you probably knew that, but in case you didn't, he dies and he's resurrected at the end. The disciples still don't get it. They don't get it. The only people who get it are the women who come to the tomb at the end. The marginalized are the ones who get it. Mark's favorite way of entering into dialogue with his audience about what matters is revealing the lack of it among the apostles of Jesus. As you read the stories, they get increasingly ridiculous and increasingly revelatory, that the point is that you have to get the inbreaking of compassion is within the power of the human community. That we ourselves, Jesus says this, you do it yourselves, that we ourselves are the miracle workers, that we are the ones that are here to bring in the compassionate community. And Jesus says, yes, I can supersede the natural laws. The deity is capable of doing that in this story. But God would rather not. She would say, please do it yourselves. I may cause the Great Salt Lake to rise 3 feet right now because I love my brine shrimp, but please solve it yourselves. You do it yourselves, Jesus says. We do it ourselves, not because God is not capable, but because we are the miracle workers. We are the ones that are called to do this work with and for each other. And there is evidence all over this world that we are collectively creating that every single day. Every time we have a life-saving vaccine or medication, every time we feed the hungry in our community, every time we share our offering, these are signs of the inbreaking of the community, of the inbreaking of compassion in our world. It doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen to be complete at any time. It is always happening because we are always showing up for one another. I'll turn us just briefly to my favorite theologian, Karen Armstrong, who happens to agree with this. Because Karen Armstrong, who is a prolific and frighteningly good theologian, emphasizes that it is this lack of faith that is the key to this gospel, and it is the purpose of this work is to unharden our hearts. For Karen Armstrong, she writes that the silence of the disciples in the face of the feeding of the 5,000, that happens outside the story, you have to be reading it closely to realize that they haven't said anything, is a sign of their hardened hearts. These people who were the closest to Jesus have hardened hearts. And that the lessening of that hardening, the opening of that hardening, the having a heart open to God, these are themes that are echoed throughout that story and throughout the entire Hebrew text. In addition, the heart, along with the lungs and the liver, was held in Greek antiquity to be the location from which compassion arrives. So you see in this story, not just the Hebrew themes coming through, but the themes of Greek antiquity, and then they are carried through into this modern era. That we are the ones who must show up, that we are the ones who are creating the miracles. So on with this. God may be perfectly capable, perhaps, of superseding natural laws from time to time. But her preference is that we do not demand such things, but instead that we create and sustain a world in which preventable suffering is minimized and unexpected suffering is always met with an open hand, a loving heart, an energy of action, and the flames of resistance, so that we can get busy with the rebuilding of lives and of communities in times of crisis, in times of joy, and in times of peace. May it be so, and amen.
Hymn 369. We'll do it twice. This is the truth that passes understanding. This is the joy to forever free. Life springs from death and shatters every fetter, and winter turns to spring eternally. This is the truth that passes understanding. This is the joy to all forever free. Life springs from death and shatters every fetter, and winter turns to spring eternally.
Please remain standing as we extinguish our chalice. And if you would be comfortable holding hands with the person next to you, I encourage you to do that. And if you are not, just your hands over your own heart, that wellspring of compassion. We extinguish this chalice, but not the warmth of community, the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the energy of action. Hold each other in our hearts until we meet again. And as you go forth on this beautiful, beautiful sacred day of the stones being rolled away from our hearts, may that inbreaking of compassion break into those tired and weary parts of your soul and shine out into the world. And maybe you can be encouraged and encouraging to each other in this week that we are the ones we have been waiting for, and we are a blessing, and may we be such to one another. Amen. Please be seated for the postlude.